It was almost midnight when Emily Carter finally pulled into the quiet courtyard of her apartment building in Boston. The streets were slick with rain and the faint hum of traffic was swallowed by the wind. She stepped out of her car, heels clicking against the pavement, her briefcase in one hand and exhaustion written all over her face. Emily had spent the last 14 hours buried in meetings and deadlines. She was the kind of woman everyone respected but few truly knew. Precise, composed, successful. Yet tonight all she wanted was a hot shower and silence. But when she reached her apartment door and pressed her thumb against the biometric lock, nothing happened. A small red light blinked back at her. She tried again, and again. Still nothing. The smart lock she'd installed for convenience had failed her. Her phone battery was at 1%. She called building security. No one answered. She tried again, only to hear the automated voice say, "Assistance will be available in the morning." Emily stood there for a long moment, her shoulders sinking under the weight of fatigue. The hallway light flickered above her, casting long shadows across the marble floor. And then, a faint glow from the apartment next door. The number 12B shone faintly on the old wooden door. Someone was awake. She hesitated. She barely knew her neighbors. She'd seen the man from 12B once or twice, always in work boots carrying wood or tools. He seemed kind but distant, a man from another world entirely. Still, the rain outside was unforgiving and she had nowhere else to go. Gathering her courage, she knocked softly. After a few seconds, the door creaked open. A man stood there wearing a plain gray t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. His hair was messy, his eyes tired but gentle. In his arms he carried a small child, a girl with tangled brown hair and a pink blanket clutched against her cheek. Emily spoke first, awkwardly. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late. I locked myself out. The building security said they can't come until morning." He studied her for a moment, cautious but polite. "That sounds rough. You can come in if you need a place to wait out the night." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." As she stepped inside, she quickly added, "I'm Emma, by the way." The lie slipped out naturally. She didn't know why. Maybe she didn't want to be Emily Carter, the marketing executive, tonight. Maybe she just wanted to be someone simple. The apartment was small but warm. The faint smell of wood polish and home-cooked stew hung in the air. Toys scattered across the floor, children's drawings taped to the fridge, and it felt alive, real. The man gently placed his daughter on the couch, covering her with a blanket. "I'm Daniel," he said quietly. "And that's Sophie." Emily smiled faintly. "She's adorable." He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's all I've got." As Daniel disappeared into the kitchen to grab her a cup of tea, Emily looked around, at the worn furniture, the framed photos, the warmth that filled every corner of the place. For the first time in years, she felt like she was standing inside a home, not just a house. And she had no idea that this unexpected night, this small act of kindness, was about to change everything she thought she knew about love, honesty, and belonging. Emily woke to the gentle sound of rain tapping against the window. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was. The faint smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the air, and the soft hum of a kettle came from the kitchen. Then she remembered the lock, the storm, and the quiet carpenter who'd let her in. She sat up on the couch, brushing away the blanket someone had tucked around her. Sophie's small stuffed rabbit rested beside her, as if the little girl had left it there for company. From the kitchen, Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Morning. Hope you like coffee. I didn't know how you take it." Emily smiled awkwardly. "Black is perfect." "Thank you." He handed her a mug, his rough hands dwarfing the delicate cup. His face was calm but reserved, as if kindness came naturally to him but trust did not. The apartment felt different in daylight, cozy, cluttered but full of warmth. A row of tiny drawings lined the fridge, crayon hearts, stick figures, and one labeled "Daddy and Me." On the dining table sat a half-finished wooden birdhouse, the smell of pine and glue faint in the air. Emily sipped the coffee and looked around. "You built this place yourself?" Daniel chuckled. "Mostly. I fix what breaks and pretend I'm good at decorating." "You're better at it than you think," she said softly. "It feels alive." Just then a small voice interrupted. "Daddy?" Sophie appeared at the hallway door, rubbing her eyes. Her hair was messy, her voice sleepy. When she saw Emily, she hesitated, clutching her blanket. Daniel crouched down. "Morning, Bug. Remember the nice lady from last night?" She had nowhere to sleep. Sophie nodded shyly. "Hi." Emily crouched too, smiling warmly. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Emma." The girl's gaze softened. "Emma's a pretty name." When Daniel went to make breakfast, Sophie climbed onto the couch beside Emily, proudly showing her a small sketchbook filled with colorful scribbles. "That's me and Daddy at the park," she said. "And that's Mommy in heaven. She sends us sunshine." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "She sounds very special." Sophie nodded. "Daddy says she had the kindest heart in the world." Daniel returned with plates and scrambled eggs, toast, and orange slices. "You don't have to eat if you're not hungry," he said, but Emily smiled and sat down. They ate together, laughter bubbling between the quiet moments. For the first time in years, Emily wasn't thinking about deadlines or boardrooms. She was watching a little girl giggle over orange juice and a man quietly fixing a wobbly chair with a napkin tucked in his collar. Later that morning, she helped wash the dishes. Daniel looked at her in surprise. "Guests usually don't do that." "Maybe I'm not a guest," she said. "Maybe I just needed a place that feels real for a while." He studied her expression. A woman clearly carrying something heavy, something hidden. But he didn't press. He simply nodded. "You're welcome here." That night, as Emily lay awake on the couch, the faint sound of Sophie's breathing in the next room soothed her. The storm had passed, but something inside her had begun to stir. A quiet warmth she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know it yet, but this small home, with its chipped mugs and mismatched curtains, was beginning to fix something inside her heart. The next morning brought sunlight streaming through the thin curtains, painting soft stripes across the living room floor. Emily stirred awake to the smell of pancakes and the faint hum of Sophie's laughter. For the first time in a long while, she didn't wake to the buzz of her phone or the pressure of an early meeting. When she sat up, Sophie was at the coffee table coloring intently while Daniel flipped pancakes at the stove. The domestic scene made Emily pause. It felt like stepping into a different kind of life, one that moved slower and breathed easier. Daniel looked over his shoulder. "Morning, Emma. Hope you like pancakes. They're kind of our Saturday tradition." She smiled. "That sounds perfect. And please, you don't have to make me breakfast." "Too late," he said with a grin. "Sophie already demanded extra chocolate chips for our guest." Sophie giggled, eyes lighting up. "Because everyone likes chocolate chips." Emily laughed, genuinely this time, and joined them at the table. It felt natural, easy, as though she'd been there before. After breakfast, Daniel called the building manager to ask about her lock. Apparently, the maintenance team couldn't come until the next day. Emily hesitated when he offered her another night on the couch. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to intrude." "You're not," he said simply. "Your company." That afternoon, Sophie tugged Emily toward the living room floor. "Can you help me build a castle?" she asked, spreading out colored paper, glue, and crayons. "Of course," Emily said, kneeling beside her. "But every castle needs a queen." Sophie thought for a moment. "You can be the queen, Daddy can be the builder, and I'll be the princess who saves everyone." Daniel looked up from his workbench and chuckled. "That sounds about right." For the next hour, the three of them cut, glued, and laughed. It was messy and wonderful. Bits of paper clung to Emily's hair, and Sophie's fingers were sticky with glue. But none of them cared. When Daniel left to take a call, Emily glanced at the photos on the shelf. Daniel holding Sophie as a toddler, a woman with gentle eyes beside them. She could see the love, the loss, and the quiet strength in every frame. When Daniel returned, she asked softly, "You built this life from nothing, didn't you?" He nodded, his eyes distant. "My wife, Rachel, she passed when Sophie was born. It broke me for a long time. But Sophie, she gave me a reason to start again." Emily swallowed hard, her chest tightening with empathy. "She's lucky to have you." He smiled faintly. "I'm lucky to have her." As evening fell, they shared dinner again, pasta and laughter under the warm glow of the kitchen light. When Sophie fell asleep, Daniel quietly tucked her in, then joined Emily on the balcony. The night air was cool. Below them, city lights shimmered like reflections of everything unspoken. "I can't remember the last time I slowed down like this," Emily admitted. "It's strange but peaceful." Daniel leaned on the railing beside her. "Sometimes peace feels strange when you're used to noise." Their eyes met briefly, a flicker of something tender, something new. Inside, Sophie murmured in her sleep, and Daniel went to check on her. Emily lingered by the window, realizing with a quiet ache that what she'd found in this small apartment wasn't just shelter. It was the first glimpse of belonging, and she wasn't ready to let it go. A few quiet days passed, and Emily found herself moving through Daniel's home as though she belonged there. She helped Sophie braid her hair before school, washed dishes beside Daniel in the evenings, and even started leaving her phone in her bag, ignoring the constant vibration of work messages that once ruled her life. It was strange. She'd lived surrounded by luxury, yet never felt this kind of peace. That evening, a soft golden sunset filled the apartment. Sophie was sprawled on the floor coloring a new picture, 3 stick figures holding hands. She titled it proudly, "Our Family." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She drew that all on her own, Daniel said from across the room, smiling. Said she wanted to make a picture of what happiness looks like. Emily forced a smile, but her heart twisted. She wanted to believe that too, that she could belong in that picture. After dinner, Daniel cleared the table while Emily gathered her purse. Her phone buzzed again, and without thinking, she pulled it out. On the screen flashed a notification. Emily Carter, Regional Director meeting Monday 10 a.m. She froze. Daniel looked up. "Emily Carter?" He repeated slowly, frowning. "I thought your name was Emma," she stammered. It's my middle name." "I just didn't," but his voice cut through, low and steady. "And Regional Director? You told me you worked at a small firm." Emily's pulse quickened. "Daniel, I didn't mean to lie. I just wanted—" He straightened, his expression hardening. "You didn't want me to know you're one of those people who can buy a building like this with a year's salary?" "That's not it," she said, her voice trembling. "I just didn't want you to see me as some executive who doesn't understand real life." He stepped closer, hurt flashing behind his calm. "Real life is all I've got, Emily. I build things with my hands. I lose sleep over bills. You came into my home pretending to be someone else, and I let you near my daughter." Her eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, please, it wasn't out of pity. It was the first time I felt human again." But he turned away, jaw tight. "I've had enough people pretend to care." Silence settled heavy in the room. Sophie's drawing still lay on the floor, Our Family. Emily bent down, fingertips brushing the paper before setting it gently on the table. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt either of you." Daniel didn't answer. He just stood there, arms crossed, a wall between them where warmth once lived. Emily turned toward the door, her heart aching with every step. The moment she stepped into the hallway, thunder rolled outside. The rain had returned, relentless and cold, as if echoing the storm that now lived between them. She looked back one last time. Daniel was still standing in the same spot, staring at the drawing on the table. And just like that, the fragile home she'd found was gone. The days that followed were quiet, painfully so. Emily returned to her penthouse, surrounded once again by the sterile perfection she used to pride herself on. The city skyline stretched endlessly through her floor-to-ceiling windows, but she couldn't feel anything except emptiness. The walls, the silence, even the faint hum of the appliances, everything reminded her of what she'd lost in one night. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages about presentations and campaigns, but every word felt hollow. She opened her email, stared at her reflection in the glass of her laptop, and closed it again. The woman who used to thrive on pressure now felt like a stranger inside her own life. Meanwhile, across the hall, Daniel's apartment was just as still, but in a different way. He kept himself busy, throwing his focus into his carpentry work, sanding wood late into the night. The rhythmic scrape of the sandpaper filled the silence that Emily once had softened with laughter. Sophie noticed it too. "Daddy," she asked one evening, holding her half-finished drawing, "is Miss Emma mad at us?" Daniel hesitated, not knowing how to answer. "No, sweetheart, she just had to go." Sophie's eyes dropped to her picture, but she said she'd help me finish the castle. He tried to smile. "We can finish it together." But when he turned away, his face tightened. The truth was, the castle didn't feel the same without her. Across the hall, Emily stood by her window holding her phone. Her thumb hovered over Daniel's number more times than she could count. She wrote messages and deleted them. Every time she started with, "I'm sorry," it felt too small. Too late. Her thoughts drifted to Sophie, her laughter, the way she called her Queen Emma, the way she'd rested her small head on Emily's shoulder. The memory stung the most. That weekend, while walking through the neighborhood, Emily passed by a small park. A father and daughter were feeding ducks near the pond. She froze for a second, their laughter, the simple joy. It was almost like seeing Daniel and Sophie again. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. A gentle voice broke her trance. It was Mrs. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who lived a few doors down. "You look lost, dear," she said kindly. Emily gave a faint smile. "Just thinking," Mrs. Thompson nodded, studying her. "That carpenter fellow, Daniel, he's a good man. Been through a lot, but good people like him don't come twice. If you care about him, don't let pride build the wall higher." Emily managed a quiet, "Thank you." But inside, she wasn't sure if she still had the right to try. That night, Daniel sat alone in his kitchen, Sophie asleep in her room. The apartment felt heavier now, not just empty but missing something vital. He looked at Sophie's drawing pinned to the fridge. The words "our family" were written in uneven crayon strokes. He reached out to touch it but stopped halfway. On the other side of the wall, Emily sat on her couch, scrolling through photos on her phone. One caught her off guard, a picture Sophie had drawn for her, a smiling stick figure holding hands with a small child. Both of them, separated by walls, sat in the same silence, missing the same laughter, the same light, the same piece of their hearts that neither knew how to fix. It was close to midnight when Daniel jolted awake to the shrill sound of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. He blinked, half asleep, his heart pounding. The number flashing on the screen was one he didn't recognize. "Mr. Miller?" A woman's voice came through, calm but urgent. "This is Dr. Patel from County Children's Hospital. Your daughter, Sophie, was brought in a few minutes ago." For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. "What? No, there must be a mistake." She was fine. She was fine when she went to bed. She had a severe fever and fainted at her babysitter's house. "We're stabilizing her, but we need you to come right away." The phone nearly slipped from his hands as he threw on his jacket, grabbing his keys in trembling fingers. Every second between his apartment and the hospital felt endless. Every red light, every turn of the wheel was torture. When he burst through the emergency doors, he was met with the cold brightness of white walls and hurried footsteps. "Sophie Miller," he gasped to the nurse at the counter. "My daughter, where is she?" Before the nurse could answer, a familiar voice called his name. "Daniel!" He turned, and there she was, Emily, standing there in a long coat, hair pulled back, eyes red with worry. For a heartbeat, he just stared at her, unable to believe she was real. How do you—" "She's in room 204, Emily said softly. "I was already here. The babysitter called me after she couldn't reach you." Daniel blinked, still processing. "She called you, why?" Emily's voice trembled slightly. "Because she had my number. Sophie gave it to her weeks ago. Said I was her emergency hero." He didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. But before he could say a word, Emily continued. "I called in one of the best pediatric specialists I know. She's with Sophie now." Daniel's breath caught. "You did what?" "I couldn't just sit and wait, Daniel. She's your world, and she means something to me too." He wanted to argue, to question her right to be there, but her voice cracked on the last word. The fight drained out of him. Together, they walked into Sophie's room. The little girl lay pale and small under the soft glow of the monitor lights, her tiny hand resting limp on the blanket. A faint beeping filled the room, steady but terrifying. Daniel sat beside her, clutching her hand. "Hey, baby. Daddy's here." Emily stood a few steps away, her hands trembling. For once, she didn't care about status, reputation, or pride. She just cared that this little girl would open her eyes again. When the doctor entered, she spoke quietly. "Her condition is stabilizing. The fever broke thanks to early intervention. She needs rest, but she'll be fine." Daniel exhaled for the first time that night, covering his face with both hands. Tears welled up, not from weakness but from relief. Emily approached slowly. "Daniel, I'm sorry for everything. I should have told you who I was, but please believe me. Nothing I ever did was fake. I just wanted to be seen for who I am, not what I own." He looked at her, exhausted, conflicted. But something in her eyes, the same eyes that had comforted his daughter, that had shown up without hesitation tonight, broke through the anger. "Thank you," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "For not giving up on her." Emily's lips trembled. "I'd never give up on either of you." For a long while they sat together in silence, watching Sophie sleep peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling. The fear of losing her had burned away everything unimportant, the lies, the pride, the distance. And somewhere in that sterile hospital room, among the monitors and moonlight, something fragile began to heal. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the hospital blinds, washing the sterile room in a soft golden glow. Sophie was still asleep, her fever gone, a faint smile curving her lips as if she were dreaming something sweet. Daniel sat by her bedside, exhausted but calm for the first time in days. Across from him, Emily sat quietly in the visitor's chair, her hands folded in her lap. Neither had spoken much through the night. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It was thoughtful, heavy with all the things they hadn't said. Daniel finally broke it. "You didn't have to come." Emily's gaze stayed on Sophie. "I know, but I wanted to." He nodded slowly. "She's lucky you did." "I'm lucky too." Emily's eyes lifted to meet his. There was gratitude there, but also guilt. "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago." He leaned back, expression guarded but patient. "Go on." She took a breath. "Years ago, when your architectural firm was struggling, when you almost lost the business, someone invested quietly. You never knew who." "That was me." Daniel froze. "You?" Emily nodded, her voice trembling. "I saw your project proposal through a mutual contact. You were trying to build sustainable homes for low-income families, something no one else believed in. I believed in it, but I didn't want to interfere or take credit. I just wanted you to have a chance." He rubbed his temples, processing everything. "All this time, I thought it was some anonymous foundation. It was me," she said softly. "And I hid it because I didn't want you to think I was trying to buy your affection. She stopped, tears filling her eyes. "I just wanted to be part of something real. You and Sophie made me feel human again." Daniel sat silently, his heart torn between disbelief and realization. The woman he thought had deceived him had in truth been helping him long before she even knew him. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. The exhaustion in her face, the fear in her eyes, the sincerity that didn't need words. "Emily," he said quietly, "you didn't have to hide who you are to be loved." "I know that now," she whispered, "but I didn't back then. I was afraid that if you saw the penthouse, the company, the money, you'd never see me." He exhaled, the bitterness that once clouded his heart slowly melting away. Maybe I was stubborn too. Maybe I let my pride get in the way of seeing what was right in front of me. A faint rustle interrupted them. Sophie stirred in her sleep, then blinked her eyes open. "Daddy, Miss Emma?" she murmured sleepily. Both turned instantly, their hands reaching for hers. "You're okay, sweetheart," Daniel said, brushing her hair back. Sophie smiled weakly. "You both look like you need a hug." Daniel laughed through his tears, glancing at Emily. "She's right, you know." Emily reached out, hesitated for a second, then embraced Sophie gently, Daniel's arm wrapping around them both. For a moment it felt like the world stood still. 3 hearts beating together, fear replaced by warmth, distance replaced by understanding. When they finally pulled back, Daniel looked at Emily again, eyes soft. "No more secrets?" Emily smiled faintly. "No more walls," he nodded. "Then maybe we can start again." This time, honestly, the corners of her lips lifted, and for the first time hope filled the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. Outside the hospital window, the city hummed with life, unaware that in one small room, forgiveness had just rewritten 2 broken stories into one. Weeks passed after that night in the hospital. Weeks that felt like a quiet sunrise after a long storm. Daniel and Sophie had returned home, and the once dim apartment was filled with new life. Sunlight streamed through open curtains. The smell of pancakes and coffee filled the air on lazy Sunday mornings. Sophie's laughter returned, bright and unfiltered. The sound that had once been missing from Daniel's world, and Emily was there. Not as a stranger behind another name, not as the powerful CEO hiding behind layers of pride, but as herself. She visited often at first, then started staying longer, helping Sophie with homework, joining them for dinner, and eventually, she simply stopped leaving. It wasn't discussed. It just happened naturally, like a puzzle finding its missing piece. One morning, Daniel stood by his drafting table, blueprints scattered everywhere. Sophie sat nearby coloring, and Emily, dressed casually in jeans and a soft cardigan, brought in 2 mugs of coffee. "You're still working on the community housing project?" she asked with a smile. Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah. This one's different, though. Affordable, eco-friendly homes for single parents. Real homes for real people." Emily's smile softened. "It's beautiful, Daniel. Just like you always dreamed." He looked up at her, the woman who had quietly believed in him when no one else did. "Couldn't have done it without you." "You could have," she said gently, "but I'm glad you didn't have to." They shared a quiet moment, the kind that spoke louder than any grand declaration. Then Sophie ran over, waving a small drawing. "Look, it's our house," she said proudly. The crayon lines were messy but full of love. 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun, a tree in the corner, and a small heart above the roof. Emily crouched down to Sophie's level. "And who's that?" "That's me, Daddy, and you," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Because you live here now." Emily froze, her throat tightening. "Do I?" she whispered. Sophie grinned. "You make pancakes," Daddy smiles again. "You tell stories at night. So yeah, you live here." Daniel chuckled, watching Emily's eyes glisten. Hard to argue with that kind of logic. Emily laughed softly, tears slipping free, not of sadness, but of the overwhelming joy of finally belonging somewhere real. That evening, the 3 of them sat on the small balcony, fairy lights glowing softly around them. The city stretched beyond, alive with twinkling windows and distant sounds of life. Daniel leaned back, holding Sophie in one arm while Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "You know," he said quietly, "when I first met you, I thought you were just another neighbor passing through. Never imagined you'd change everything." Emily smiled. "Funny. I thought I was the one who had everything, until I met you and realized I had nothing that truly mattered." He turned to her, his voice tender. "And now?" She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Now I have a home." Sophie giggled sleepily between them. "You both talk too much," she murmured, curling closer. They laughed softly, pulling her. In tighter, the 3 of them framed against the glow of the city. A picture of warmth, redemption, and love found not in grand gestures, but in second chances. Months later, Daniel's housing project was completed. Families moved into their new homes. Parents who had once lost hope. Children who finally had safe places to dream. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Emily stood beside him, not as a sponsor, but as his partner. When he introduced her to the crowd, he simply said, "This project exists because of kindness, hers, mine, and everyone who believed in something better." The applause was warm, heartfelt. Emily's eyes met his. No words were needed. As the camera panned out, Sophie's voice could be heard saying, "See, Daddy, I told you happy endings are real. Life has a way of rebuilding itself, not through wealth, not through status, but through love, forgiveness, and courage to start again." Emily and Daniel didn't find perfection. They built something better, a home made of kindness. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Because sometimes one act of kindness can rebuild an entire life.